What do we see in the photos of Princess Diana? For many, the answer is simple: a woman of unmatched beauty, dazzling charisma, and boundless kindness. However, when we truly look, there's something beyond her smile. A deep sadness, an emptiness, as if Diana were trapped in a reality few could understand. What if this reality was not just the weight of royalty or the relentless pursuit of the media? What if, behind the facade of the people's princess, there was something much darker and more terrifying? You might call it paranoia. I call it vision. This is light, also known as L, and together we'll break the code they've hidden from you. But remember, every shared discovery enlightens new minds. What really happened to Diana, and what price did she pay for a life of apparent perfection? It all began long before Diana became the people's princess, back in late summer of 1980, when she was just Lady Diana Spencer. Before she was a princess, she was already being prepared for a game no one understands. The question is, who was moving the pieces? At 19, her life seemed to follow the natural course of a young aristocrat, peaceful, privileged, but without the weight of power. However, upon being drawn into the orbit of the British royal family, Diana saw her routine turned upside down, as if a greater force was dragging her into an inescapable destiny. It was within this context that something occurred that would forever change her existence. One night, alone in her room, Diana was awakened by a presence that should not have been there. It wasn't an ordinary figure. When she tried to describe it later, her words were vague, as if her mind couldn't grasp all the details. He was tall, incredibly tall, with eyes that seemed like wells of darkness and a voice that filled the entire room, like a chorus of whispers. He said he knew all her secrets and had come to offer her something. What would you do if someone promised to make all your dreams come true in exchange for something seemingly intangible? This being, whom Diana described as impossibly ancient, offered her love, fame, and the adoration of millions. According to Diana's words, hastily written down by a trusted person, she didn't remember saying yes. There was no verbal agreement, but the oppressive heat that invaded the room that night, followed by an unnatural silence, seemed to seal the pact. The next morning, Lady Diana Spencer believed she had had a nightmare. She told herself this so many times she almost believed it. But the following weeks were marked by strange events. Her nights were filled with disturbing dreams in which an endless corridor surrounded her while an invisible presence whispered her name. During the day, shadows seemed to move around her, too quick to catch with the eye, but noticeable enough to send chills down her spine. When her engagement to Charles was announced, Diana began to experience a kind of dual reality. To the public, she was the radiant young woman about to become a princess. However, in her private life, she felt that something had changed forever. During wedding preparations, Diana confided to a friend that she felt like she was being watched. "It's not the cameras," she said. "It's something else, distant, yet close at the same time." On the night before the ceremony, Diana's dreams reached a new level of intensity. She saw herself in front of a mirror that did not reflect her image, but something grotesque, a silhouette that seemed like hers but was distorted. When she tried to touch the glass, the reflection broke into a wide, cruel smile, as if it was waiting for something from her. Diana woke up gasping, her hands sweaty, and her heart racing, but she decided to move forward. On the big day, as millions watched the ceremony on television, Diana was the very picture of a fairy tale princess. Her white dress, the veil, the glow of her expression, everything seemed perfect. But behind the beauty and elegance, she felt a constant coldness that even the warmth of the moment could not dispel. Throughout the ceremony, she had the feeling that someone was watching her, not from the crowd, but from somewhere deeper, beyond the visible. Have you ever wondered what lies behind a perfect smile? Is the joy we see in a person real, or can it hide an unconfessable fear? For Diana, the answer was clear. Her life had become a theater play, with an audience that adored her without knowing about the constant presence that haunted her. At the end of the day, Already in the royal chambers, the suffocating feeling returned with full force. Diana looked at the mirror in her room, and for an instant, she saw that figure again. This time, it did not disappear immediately. It just stayed there, silently, as if patiently waiting for the game to begin. From that moment on, Diana understood that the promise of fame and adoration came with a price. But what would that price be? The first months after the wedding seemed like they were straight out of a fairy tale. Diana became a global icon, with her kindness and charisma captivating people of all ages and social classes. However, behind the impeccable facade, she battled against something she couldn't explain. It was as if an invisible shadow followed her everywhere, a weight that refused to leave her. Nights were particularly difficult. Diana began waking up at random times, always with the feeling that there was something, or someone, in the room with her. It's the kind of thing that makes you question your sanity. But the fear is very real when it feels like you're never truly alone. Her body would be covered in an oppressive heat, as if the air around her was alive. Sometimes, she swore she heard faint whispers in the silence. But when she opened her eyes, everything seemed normal. Maybe it's just the pressure, she told herself, trying to push the fear away. However, the signs became increasingly evident. During a formal dinner, Diana looked at a large mirror in the hall and saw something that made her freeze. Among the faces of the guests, for a brief moment, appeared the same figure she had seen before. Its eyes were black and deep, and its face constantly shifted, as if made of smoke. Diana blinked, and the vision vanished, but the feeling of unease remained. The situation worsened when she became pregnant with Prince William. For many women, motherhood is a time of fulfillment and hope. But for Diana, it was a period marked by silent terror. One rainy night, as she looked out the window of her apartment in Kensington Palace, she saw the figure again. This time, it wasn't a reflection. It was there, standing in the drenched gardens. The lightning illuminated its tall, skeletal silhouette with arms that seemed longer than they should be. What would you do if you felt something unexplainable was watching every moment of your life? Diana froze, unable to look away. When she finally managed to move, she ran to her bedroom and locked the door. She spent the entire night sitting on the floor, hugging her belly, feeling vulnerable and exposed. The dreams turned into nightmares. Diana began dreaming repeatedly of an endless corridor, where she heard footsteps approaching but could never see who or what made them. The walls of the corridor seemed to pulsate, as if alive, and an unbearable heat emanated from all sides. When she woke up, she was always gasping, her heart racing, with the sense that something was wrong inside her. In one of her rare moments of confession, Diana confided to a close friend that she felt as though she had made a terrible mistake. "It's like something has marked me," she said with a trembling voice. Her friend tried to reassure her, suggesting it might be the stress of public life. But Diana knew it wasn't that. There was something more, something she couldn't explain, but that was undeniably real. The people around her began to notice that something was changing. Diana, once vibrant and full of energy, often seemed distracted, as if her mind were elsewhere. She started avoiding mirrors, saying she didn't want to see what was there. Paparazzi captured her lost expression in the midst of crowds, but the public attributed it to the pressure of being a public figure. The tension increased when she began reporting phenomena that no one else witnessed. Shadows moving in the corners of her room, whispers emerging from nowhere, and that constant presence that seemed to get closer every day. But how do you explain something so absurd without sounding insane? How do you seek help for something no one would believe? Once, during an official trip, Diana woke up in the middle of the night in a hotel, feeling suffocated. The room seemed strangely hot, and the figure was there again, in the corner, as still as a statue. "What do you want from me?" she whispered, tears streaming down her face. It tilted its head in a movement that did not seem human and replied in a voice of 1,000 echoes, "You already know." After that night, Diana began keeping a diary, noting down every experience she had. Her words were desperate, often incoherent, but filled with a deep sense of terror. She wrote about the heat she felt, the disturbing dreams, and the sensation that something inside her was changing. The manifestations were no longer limited to the night. Diana began to feel the presence even during the day, at official events, amidst the crowds. "They don't see," she wrote in one of her notes, "but it's always there, watching, waiting." Why did no one see what she saw? Diana began to wonder if she was losing her sanity or if the world around her was deliberately ignoring the signs. After all, isn't it easier to look away than to face the darkness? The 1990s brought significant changes to Diana's life. Her marriage to Charles was deteriorating, and their marital issues became a public spectacle, fueling headlines worldwide. To many, Diana was a woman crumbling under pressure, but something deeper and invisible was eroding her sanity, the sense that she had been marked by something she could not control. It was as if the shadow that followed her had become part of her very existence. Diana began describing a constant sensation of weight on her chest, as if something were lodged inside her. Have you ever felt a weight that isn't physical? It's as if the presence marks you from within, an invisible signature that cannot be erased. In private conversations, she mentioned that in moments of absolute silence, she could hear a distant, almost imperceptible buzzing that seemed to come from within her own mind. Have you ever felt like you're carrying something you can't explain, an invisible weight no one else can see? For Diana, this sensation was constant. She started wearing religious necklaces and pendants as a form of protection, but this only seemed to intensify her vulnerability. The sacred objects, which were supposed to bring comfort, often grew warm against her skin, as if rejecting her presence. During one of her medical appointments, Diana asked the doctor if it was possible to feel something beneath the skin without any visible injury. "It's like a burn, but there's nothing there," she said, pointing to the center of her chest. The doctor laughed, attributing her words to stress, but Diana knew it wasn't her imagination. The unease grew when she began to notice her dreams becoming more vivid and more terrifying. In one of these visions, Diana lay on a cold marble table while a faceless figure hovered above her. She felt a pressure on her chest, as if something were being etched directly onto her soul. She woke up gasping for air, her chest burning, and the image of a symbol, which she couldn't quite recall, etched into her mind. Diana discreetly sought answers. She visited therapists, mediums, and even paranormal experts, never fully revealing what she was experiencing. But no explanation seemed satisfactory. To some, it was merely a manifestation of extreme stress. To others, it was a sign she was being targeted by a malevolent spiritual energy. In a moment of desperation, Diana confided in a priest during an official trip. He listened silently as she described the presence haunting her and the suffocating heat she felt. After a long pause, the priest said something she would never forget. "Sometimes, when we make a pact, even unknowingly, the price has already been sealed. Do you still have the faith to resist?" Those words echoed in Diana's mind for days. A pact? What did that mean? Was the figure that had visited her years earlier a literal manifestation of an agreement she had unconsciously made? Or was it all merely a metaphor for the weight of her new life? The mark became more apparent. Diana began experiencing inexplicable physical pains, always concentrated in her chest. She would run her hands over the area, hoping to find something, but her skin remained unblemished. However, one night, after stepping out of the bath, she noticed something that left her speechless. In the fogged-up mirror, there was a vague shape, almost like a scar, glowing faintly in the center of her chest. Terrified, she wiped away the steam and tried to look closer, but the mark vanished as quickly as it had appeared. She began avoiding looking at herself in mirrors, fearing to see something she couldn't bear. At public events, Diana was often seen placing her hand over her heart as if trying to protect something. Tabloids interpreted it as an emotional gesture, an expression of her empathy. But to her, it was a desperate attempt to anchor herself, to prevent something from escaping or perhaps from entering. Do you believe destiny can be sealed by unconscious choices? Diana began to wonder if her life had been claimed by something beyond her control, a force she would never fully understand. Gradually, she realized that her struggle wasn't just against the presence haunting her, but also against a world that refused to believe what she was experiencing. Her attempts to share fragments of her truth with close friends were often met with worried glances, as if she were becoming paranoid. "Maybe I am," she wrote in her diary, "but that doesn't mean it isn't real." Diana knew she needed to confront the truth about what was happening, but the question remained: how do you fight something deeply intertwined with your very soul? A few months before her death, Diana confided in a close friend that she had stopped using mirrors at home. When you decide to stay away from mirrors, it's not vanity, it's survival. Diana knew she was being watched by something beyond the glass. It wasn't just superstition or disinterest, but a genuine aversion. "I don't like what I see," she reportedly said. The friend, intrigued, asked why, but Diana avoided giving details, merely saying, "Sometimes it's not my face that appears." This reluctance was noticed by others close to her. A former assistant revealed that the larger mirrors in Diana's Kensington Palace apartment had been covered with sheets. When asked, Diana evasively explained it was to avoid distractions. But according to him, the reason seemed deeper. On one particularly quiet evening, while preparing for an event, Diana had an experience she described as terrifyingly real. Adjusting her necklace in front of the mirror, she noticed her reflection didn't follow her movements. For an instant, the image remained static while Diana moved. When she stopped, the reflection tilted its head to one side and smiled, a smile that wasn't human. The episode left her paralyzed, but when she blinked, the reflection had returned to normal. Diana tried to rationalize the event, telling herself it was just an illusion caused by exhaustion. But deep down, she knew something was wrong. Do you believe mirrors can be more than simple objects? In many spiritual traditions, they are seen as portals or reflections of the soul. Was Diana haunted by what was inside her, or was she seeing something that transcends our understanding? As the years went by, the signs that something was terribly wrong became impossible to ignore. Diana, once confident and charismatic, began to avoid crowds, fearing that the presence following her would manifest more visibly. Despite her reserved behavior, her popularity continued to grow. But within her, an invisible and relentless struggle unfolded. The figure, which had previously appeared only in dreams or fleeting reflections, now seemed to accompany her everywhere. The line between dream and reality begins to blur when you feel the presence beside you in broad daylight. Diana saw it in the corners of rooms during charity events, in the gardens of Kensington Palace, and in moments of greatest vulnerability, beside her bed. It was a constant presence, a shadow that could not be dispelled no matter how hard she tried. One particularly striking moment occurred during an official visit to India. Diana, already separated from Charles, sat alone on the famous marble bench at the Taj Mahal, where she was photographed in one of the most iconic images of her life. While the world interpreted her expression as melancholic, Diana confided to a close friend that, during those minutes of solitude, she felt the presence again. "It was as if it was there, beside me, reminding me of what's to come," she said in a low and troubled tone. Have you ever felt like you're being watched, even when no one is around? Diana lived with this feeling. Every night, the oppressive heat wrapped around her like a cloak, and a distant, almost inaudible whisper filled the silence. "Remember the pact," it said repeatedly, like a mantra echoing in her mind. The most terrifying moment occurred in 1995, while Diana was sleeping in her apartment at the palace. It was a quiet night, but she suddenly woke up, her heart racing and her breathing labored. The room felt different. The air seemed denser, and a dark shadow stretched across the ceiling, even though there was no light source to explain it. She tried to move, but felt paralyzed, unable to lift even a finger. The figure stood there, at the foot of her bed. Its form seemed more defined than ever, almost solid but still cloaked in darkness. It tilted its head in an inhuman manner, as if studying her. "Are you ready to pay?" the voice whispered, reverberating like muffled thunder in her ears. Diana tried to scream, but no sound came from her mouth. Her body trembled, her hands clutched the sheets, but terror completely consumed her. The figure moved closer, extending a long, deformed hand as the heat in the room grew exponentially. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. She woke up drenched in sweat, alone, but with a clear mark of fingers on her arm where it had touched her. This event marked a turning point. Diana began to realize that the promise made that night years ago was not merely symbolic. The pact had a price, and it was growing closer to being collected. She began to seek answers more fervently, but her search was always thwarted. In one of her attempts to understand what was happening, Diana consulted a woman known for performing exorcisms. The medium, upon placing her hands on Diana, immediately recoiled as if burned. "There's something inside you," she said with wide eyes. "Something ancient, something that doesn't belong to this world." In tears, Diana asked if there was any way to rid herself of it, but the woman simply shook her head. "What has been sealed cannot be undone." As the months passed, Diana began to feel that her life was nearing an inevitable conclusion. She told close friends that she felt time was running out. She spoke of recurring dreams where she saw herself running through a dark tunnel with a bright light at the end, but she could never reach it. A curious detail is that in her final conversations with confidants, Diana frequently mentioned the word debt. At a private dinner, she whispered to a friend, "He's coming. I know he is. There's no escape." Although no one knew whom or what she was referring to, the tone in her voice was chilling. The climax of this terror came in the summer of 1997. Diana was in Paris, seeking a brief respite from the pressures of public life. But even there, she felt she wasn't alone. On the night of the accident, she confided to a friend over the phone that she felt a presence with her, something she couldn't explain. "It's like something is lurking, waiting for the right moment," she said. "Have you ever felt as though you're walking straight into destiny, unable to change its course?" Diana felt exactly that. On that fateful night, as she got into the car that would take her into the tunnel, she knew something was about to happen. She looked at the driver, then at Dodie, and finally at her own reflection in the glass. For an instant, she saw something in her reflection's eyes, something that wasn't hers. The crash in the tunnel was swift and brutal. To the world, it was a tragic accident that took one of the most beloved figures of the century. But for Diana, it was the fulfillment of something she knew to be inevitable. In the days leading up to her death, Diana seemed burdened by an unexplainable restlessness. When someone knows something is coming, you can see it in their eyes. Diana knew the end was closer than ever. Close friends reported that she was nervous, distracted, and often looked over her shoulder as if expecting to see someone. During a private conversation, she mentioned the feeling of being watched, but didn't elaborate. On the night of the accident, Diana had dinner with Dodie at the Ritz and seemed thoughtful. A hotel staff member who saw her that evening said she appeared more serious than usual. When asked if something was wrong, Diana reportedly replied, "It's coming. I feel it." Shortly before getting into the car, Diana looked at the driver and hesitated for a brief moment. According to accounts, it seemed as though she was about to say something but changed her mind. During the drive, as the car moved through the streets of Paris, Diana looked out the window and whispered something no one could hear. Did she know what was about to happen? The tunnel where the accident occurred became the setting for a tragedy that still intrigues the world. But for Diana, it may have been the inevitable outcome of a pact sealed long ago. Why did she seem so uneasy? Were the visions and whispers from previous years intensifying in those final moments? Or was it that, at last, the price of the pact was being collected? Princess Diana's life has always been seen as a modern fairy tale, but the darker and more inexplicable details of her story remain shrouded in mystery. From the first signs of an unusual presence to the terrifying events preceding her death, her journey leads us to reflect on what we truly know about the forces shaping our destiny. While the world mourned her death as a tragic accident, those who delve deeper into her life and the signs she left behind may wonder, what if there's something more? Something beyond our understanding? Something she tried to warn us about but was never heard? The truth is out there, hidden between the lines of a system no one dares to question. But if you're ready to see beyond what you're shown, like, comment, and share this video with those who also need to awaken. Tell me, what mystery should we uncover in the next episode? Together, we'll break the codes they try to keep secret. This is just the beginning of the hidden secret.